You ever get that feeling? The one that sends a chill down your spine, makes your heart race, and you can't quite explain why? It's like, you know something's not right, but you can't put your finger on it. Maybe it's a creak in the house late at night, or the feeling of eyes on you when no one's there. Sometimes, the scariest things aren't what you see, but what you can't. Tonight, we're diving into stories like that, real accounts, unsettling and terrifying. And I hope you're ready, because once you hear them, you won't be able to shake them. Story 1. The Man in the Vents. A few years back, I was living alone in a small apartment in a pretty quiet part of town. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom on the top floor of a 4-story building. The kind of place where you knew a few neighbors but mostly kept to yourself. It was late, probably close to 11 p.m., and I was finishing up some work on my laptop when I heard a faint noise. At first, I didn't think much of it. The building was old, and it creaked all the time. But this was different. It was coming from the ceiling. It sounded like something shifting, maybe a pipe settling or a bird on the roof, I thought. I turned back to my work, trying to ignore it. But the sound didn't stop. It wasn't constant. It came in bursts. Scratching. A slow, deliberate sound like something being dragged across metal. I glanced up, my eyes tracing the vents that ran along the ceiling. I told myself it was nothing, probably an animal or something that had gotten in. I figured I'd call maintenance in the morning. Then I heard it again, closer this time. The sound was coming from the vent directly above my bed. I stared at it, a knot forming in my stomach. My mind raced, trying to come up with a logical explanation. Rats? Squirrels? Something else? I stood up slowly, moving closer to the vent, listening. The scratching stopped. For a moment, everything was dead silent, and I thought maybe whatever it was had gone. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound. Breathing. There was no mistaking it. The steady, soft inhale and exhale of someone or something right above me. I backed away, heart pounding in my chest. There was no way anyone could be up there, right? This was a tiny building. No attic, no crawl space between the floors. I kept telling myself that as I grabbed my phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called my landlord, trying to stay calm, but when I told him what I was hearing, he got quiet. He told me to get out of the apartment immediately and that he was on his way. That was all he said before hanging up. Now I was freaking out. I grabbed my keys and left, standing outside in the cool night air, waiting for him to show up. It felt like forever, but he finally pulled up, looking more shaken than I'd expected. He didn't say much, just unlocked the front door and told me to wait downstairs while he went up to check. I heard him walking around the apartment, opening doors, moving things. Then I heard him come back down the stairs. His face was pale. "There's nothing in the vents," he said, avoiding eye contact. But I heard something. I know I did. My voice was shaking, and I could barely keep my thoughts straight. He hesitated for a second, then sighed. "There's something I didn't tell you when you moved in." He rubbed his temples, looking tired. "The guy who used to live in your apartment, he was found dead in the vent system. He'd been living up there for months, hiding. No one knew." My blood ran cold. "They found him after the tenant complained about noises, kind of like what you've been hearing. He'd been sneaking into people's apartments, watching them through the vents. But one day, he got stuck up there, and, well, he didn't make it. I could hardly breathe." "You mean to tell me someone died in those vents?" "Yeah, but that was years ago," he said quickly. "Maintenance cleaned everything out. It's not possible for anyone to be up there now." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that someone was still up there, watching. A few days later, I broke my lease and moved out. I don't care what the landlord said. I know what I heard. And sometimes, when it's late at night and I'm lying in bed, I still think I can hear that faint, rhythmic breathing just above me. Story 2. The Shadow at the Window. I was staying at my aunt and uncle's cabin for the summer, out in the middle of nowhere. It was supposed to be a retreat, a place to escape from the chaos of city life and just relax. It wasn't the kind of cabin you're imagining, though. No quaint little log house in the woods. It was this old, sprawling place that had been in our family for years, sitting on the edge of a forest that stretched on for miles. The place always felt a little strange to me, even as a kid. There were too many windows, too many places for someone or something to be watching you. But that summer, I figured it was time to get over my childhood fears and enjoy the peace and quiet. The first couple of nights were uneventful. The woods were eerily silent. No howling animals or chirping insects, but I convinced myself that's what quiet really was. No distractions, no stress. But then came the third night. I woke up around 1 a.m., feeling off. I wasn't sure why. I hadn't heard anything, and there was no sudden noise to jolt me awake. It was just a feeling. You know that feeling when you know someone's looking at you? That's what it was. I was lying there, heart starting to pick up, but I didn't dare open my eyes. For some reason, I just didn't want to look. I told myself to relax, that I was being ridiculous. But that feeling, it just wouldn't go away. Slowly, I cracked one eye open, just to scan the room. The window was wide open. Now, I know I didn't open that window. It had been closed all day, and there was no reason for me to open it before bed. But there it was, open enough that someone tall, could easily slip in. I sat up slowly, staring at it, heart pounding in my chest. I was sure I had locked it. I had to have. I took a breath, telling myself maybe I just forgot. Maybe the wind had blown it open, though the air was still and cold outside. That's when I saw something shift, just beyond the window. I froze. It was dark outside, but there was enough moonlight filtering through the trees that I could make out a shape. Something tall, standing just at the edge of the trees, barely visible. My first thought was it was an animal, maybe a deer or something, but it was standing too still, too tall. I couldn't move. My eyes were locked on the figure, and a slow, creeping dread washed over me. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew, deep down, I was looking at a person. They didn't move. They didn't make a sound. They just stood there. For what felt like hours, I sat there, staring, waiting for them to do something. But they didn't. Eventually, I forced myself to close the window as quietly as I could. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the latch, but I managed to lock it. I stood there, staring out into the dark, heart thundering in my chest. The figure was still there, unmoving, watching. I backed away from the window and climbed back into bed, my mind racing. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Every few minutes, I'd glance back at the window, but the figure never moved. By the time the sun came up, they were gone. I told myself it was probably just a hiker passing through the woods. Maybe they'd gotten lost and were looking for shelter. But the longer I thought about it, the more I doubted that. Why hadn't they knocked on the door? Why hadn't they said anything? The next few nights, I kept all the windows shut and locked. But every night, I'd wake up at the same time, 1 a.m., with that same sickening feeling of being watched. And every night, I'd look outside, and that figure would be there, just standing at the edge of the trees. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to sound crazy. But it was driving me insane, this silent figure, this sense of being hunted. Then one night it got worse. I woke up again, same time, heart already pounding. I glanced at the window, and I swear my heart stopped. The figure, they weren't at the edge of the woods anymore. They were closer, just a few feet away from the window now, standing still, their face obscured by shadow. I shot out of bed and locked the door to my room, shoving a chair under the handle. I was too scared to go outside, too terrified to even look out the window again. I spent the whole night just sitting there, waiting for something to happen. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point, I must have dozed off because when I woke up, it was morning again, and the figure was gone. I decided enough was enough. I packed my things and left the cabin that day, telling myself I was being paranoid, that it was all just some creepy coincidence. But on my way out, something caught my eye. There was a single, fresh footprint in the dirt, right outside the window. It was large, too large to be mine, and it wasn't facing toward the woods, like someone walking away. It was facing the window, like someone had been standing there, looking in. That's when I realized it hadn't been the wind that opened the window. Someone had been inside. Story 3. The night the basement door creaked. I'd moved into this house, out in the middle of nowhere, for peace and quiet. City life was draining, and the silence of the countryside was meant to be a break, a place to unwind. I'd gotten the house for a steal, which I thought was due to its distance from town. The previous owner seemed a little too eager to sell, but I didn't think much of it. That was a mistake. It was the second week I'd been there when things started getting strange. The house was old, with creaky floors and pipes that groaned in the night. But this wasn't that. This was different. It started with the basement door. I remember waking up around 2 a.m., the kind of wake up where you're not sure if a noise stirred you or if you just randomly came to. I listened for a moment, trying to shake off the grogginess. Then, I heard it, a slow, almost deliberate creak of the basement door downstairs. It's an old house, so doors can swell, settle, shift, but this sound wasn't random. It was like someone was pushing it, inch by inch. I told myself it was nothing, tried to calm my nerves, but I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling in my gut. I got out of bed, tiptoed downstairs, and there it was, open. Just a crack, but open. The air felt wrong, colder and heavier. I figured I must have forgotten to latch it properly, so I closed it again, locked it in fact. My heartbeat was starting to calm down as I went back upstairs, but I couldn't sleep. The next night it happened again. Same time, same sound. A creaking that seemed almost intentional, like someone wanted me to hear it. I checked the door again. Open. This time I stood there longer, staring down the basement stairs. It was pitch black down there, and even though every instinct screamed for me to turn on the light, I didn't. Something about seeing what was down there felt wrong, like I wouldn't be able to unsee it. The thought of it made my skin crawl. But the third night? That's when it got worse. I heard the creaking again, but this time, something else followed it. A soft dragging sound. Something heavy, like a sack being pulled across the floor. My heart felt like it stopped in my chest. I locked my bedroom door, and I didn't go down that night. The morning after, I decided to call someone to check the place out. Maybe there were rats, I told myself. Maybe something else. But I never made the call. When I went downstairs to grab my phone, I froze. The basement door was wide open. Not cracked this time, fully open. My skin went ice cold. There were muddy footprints leading from the door, and they didn't stop at the basement stairs. They trailed all the way to my bedroom door. They stopped just outside my room. I swear I almost passed out. I grabbed my keys and ran out of the house, not even bothering to grab anything else. I haven't been back since. I later found out something disturbing. The previous owner, an old man who lived alone, had disappeared. They'd never found him. Some said he'd just wandered off into the woods, but others they whispered about strange noises in the house, about the basement door opening at night. I don't know what's down there. I don't want to know. But someone or something is still in that house. And they were just inches away from me, standing outside my door while I slept. Strange footsteps outside your window, a figure in the shadows, or just a gut feeling that something is horribly wrong. Sometimes it's those ordinary moments that hold the most terrifying truths. The stories you've just heard are reminders that fear doesn't always come from the supernatural. It's often the very real, the very possible, that keeps us awake at night. Just remember, when the night falls and the quiet sets in, not everything is what it seems. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next round of stories. And if you've got a terrifying experience of your own, share it in the comments below. Who knows, your story might just be the next one to haunt us all. Stay safe, stay aware, because you never know who or what might be watching.